At Indianapolis, the first day of time trials on the race course, another great racing name, Andretti. This is Jeff Andretti, Mario's youngest son.
You know, I was always an open book and just a sponge. I want to just absorb everything that they can give me.
Here comes the winner of this Super Vee race, Jeff Andretti. Congratulations to Jeff, his first win in Super Vee competition.
I believe we also made history that day, too. I think we were the first time the father-son won on the same weekend.
Jubilation from the cockpit as the crowd is going wild down here as Jeff climbs out.
I ended up doing a double 360 off of turn 4 and actually parked the car under my guy's hand. And my dad comes over and he goes, I guess that didn't work.
Well, goddamn Jeff Andretti run right over. He's all over the goddamn track.
Here's what people don't realize, that at the banquet that year, he actually apologized to me for that incident.
Now just violently.
Boy, Jeff.
My face hit the steering wheel, the race car. That's how far I stretched.
Car 21, Jeff Andretti is on the course. What an amazing comeback story this is.
You know, you're gonna have bad days, but you're also gonna have great days, you know? So it's just one of those deals where perseverance does pay off.
All right, welcome back to Open Wheel Rewind. I'm your host, Ryan Nothhaft, and I'm thrilled today to be joined by Jeff Andretti, a man that contested 21 starts in the IndyCar series, and during that time, he managed to win the 1991 Indy 500 Rookie of the Year, as well as the Kart World Series 1991 Rookie of the Year. And oh, by the way, in 1993, he set the unofficial closed course record for IndyCar. So, Jeff, one, real honored to have you on, but really looking forward to going down memory lane with you.
Oh, thanks. Great to be here.
Well, you bet. And before we hop into it, I'd be remiss not to bring it up, but your nephew, Marco Andretti, just announced his retirement not too long ago. I'm sure you're a proud uncle, but wondering if you have any reflections on Marco's career before we hop into yours.
Oh, yeah, I do. I mean, especially in the early days, I was part of Marco's, I coached Marco when he first started, when he was in the Skip Barber. With the Skip Barber driving school, and then we did the Skip Barber series. I helped coach him in those days, and I just saw the talent right from the day one when we went to the driving school. We saw, you could automatically see that he had what it took, especially car control. I mean, I couldn't believe the amount of car control that he really had, and I kept arguing with the instructors, that at the driving school to just kind of let him do his thing. Especially because he was driving in the wet. And I just kept telling him, just find the grip where you think the grip is. Don't go by what they're telling you. They're always telling you to rim shot it. But if the grip is a little closer to the actual groove, stay there, and that's what he was doing. He was kind of feeling his way around the racetrack. And I was really impressed by, the fact that he was able to see that, and that's in the early stages of his career. So I knew that there was something there with this kid. And throughout the season, when we got into the Skip Barber series, we just started achieving success, maybe not quite as quickly at the beginning, but then it started coming around, as he started gaining more and more track time, he got better and better. I mean, and his racecraft got better and better. That's to me was the key thing, is his racecraft. He was able to think on the racetrack as well as be aggressive. There's that fine line, and he actually had that gift that he could really be aggressive when he needed to be, but he also could pull back when he needed to be, in certain situations. So he was definitely a well-rounded driver.
One of my favorites, we'll never forget the 2006 Indy 500, and of course the big pole there that he won in 2020. So incredible legacy, and congratulations to Marco on a fantastic career. Wanted to hop into your career a bit and actually start kind of with your motivations to get into motorsport. Obviously, your dad, world famous Mario Andretti, one of the biggest legends in motorsports ever. So I have no doubt that he was an influence for you to get into racing. But I guess my question is, obviously going up in racing and around racing, when did you personally know that you want to do more than just watch racing, but when did you know you actually wanted to be a driver yourself?
Well, just kind of being around it, and when you're being around it, you just want to, you get curious as to, wonder what it's like to actually drive, and get out there and actually do it yourself. And so I decided to do that. And when I turned, I think it was 15 or 16. I drove, earlier days too, and I started actually really driving go-karts, so I was 9 years old, but kind of took a little bit of a sabbatical, to be a kid. But as I started getting a little older, I decided, I needed to start making career choices. So to what path I really want to try and choose. And I chose the driving path, and that's when I started in go-karts. And once I started karts, I had little trying times at the beginning, but certainly learn, just by seat time. And the more I drove, the better and then the more comfortable I started to feel. And I just all of a sudden I started achieving success with it. And starting, once you win, then you don't ever look back. It's once you get that taste for that victory, then you want nothing but the win. So, and you don't want to settle for second. Like my brother always said, second is first loser. So, and he's very true about that.
Yeah, when you are going to kart races as a kid, obviously your dad's probably on the road. Who is taking you to the track and coaching and mentoring you when your dad's not there?
Coaching me or
Well,
that?
just, when you're karting, right? Is there someone that's
Um,
taking you to the track and giving you advice?
I was going to the track actually with my cousin John. My cousin John was going to college in those days when I was doing go-karting. So in his spare time, he was helping me out with the go-karts. So was great to kind of have him help out, and we had a lot of fun doing it. A lot of laughs, but we also achieved a lot of success. But I also learned a lot from John. John was quite the racer himself. So it was a lot of fun. And, of course, when my dad was around, he would always come visit. And when he could, he'd come out to the races and watch me run. And of course, his advice was always, much needed. And I always thought it was great that I had not only my father, but I had my brother, but I also had my cousin that I could, pick their brains and figure out, what can I do better, and so it was always nice that we were able to have those conversations around the dinner table, and but a lot of times that's how you make yourself better, because obviously if you think you know everything, you know nothing, right? So I was always an open book and just a sponge. I want to just absorb everything that they can give me.
You mentioned many of the members of your family, no doubt. You mentioned the dinner table. Was there anyone outside of your family that you maybe looked up to? I mean, you were exposed to so many legends, I'm assuming, in your childhood. Was there anyone that didn't have the last name of Andretti that you also either looked up to or sought advice from?
Um, I had the opportunity to drive for AJ Foyt, so at the Speedway, and obviously it was kind of an unusual situation having an Andretti driving for AJ Foyt, knowing that everybody thought that, oh, we were just big nemesis, but it worked out. It was great. It was actually a great experience driving for him, because I got to learn from a different perspective. Got to get his side of things versus my father's side of things, and compare notes. It was great. It was actually, I learned so much that month, because AJ, just the wealth of knowledge that he had at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, I would be a fool not to take advantage of that. And it was fun. I had a great time. Unfortunately, we didn't have, we had a mechanical failure in that race that day in '92, and got the wall. But unfortunate, that we couldn't get the result for him.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going into depth on that with you in a little bit here. Wanted to circle back to kind of your beginnings. You obviously, I think, won several Formula Ford championships right off the bat once you moved up away from karts.
Uh-huh.
Did just driving come naturally for you, or did you really have to work for that early success?
Um, it started coming fairly natural. It started feeling more natural to me the more I drove, the more I started feeling, comfortable with it. Obviously at the driving schools, I tried to excel and be the best student as I could at that school. I strived to be the best one. And, in all the exercises that we did, I always strived to be the guy that everybody was trying to follow, or setting the benchmark. So it's, um, yeah, I mean, in the early days, it was fun. I had a great time. I had a lot of success with the Formula Ford series, obviously the Skip Barber series, we won that and won Rookie of the Year that year in that series. And of course, then I did the national series the following year with Skip Barber himself actually fielding me a car. And, we ended up having success that year. We won the championship in the Northeast. And unfortunately, in the big runoffs that they had that year, I didn't have such good fortune. And I got taken out on the very first lap. Coming around, we were battling, and the guys that I was battling with, one guy got turned in front of me, and unfortunately, I had to take evasive action to miss him, and ended up in the tire wall. Unfortunate. So then in my day at the runoffs, and I was so looking forward to the runoffs because we had a car that could win that race. We were so fast, and I was just one of those races that you had to bide your time, especially at Road Atlanta. It was all about drafting, so it was just hang back, and just be patient. And that's really where I was trying to be, is patient. And unfortunately, got taken out by being patient.
Gotcha. Well, you graduated to a series called Formula Super Vee, and I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that series because when I grew up, it was, when I go to the races, it was IndyCar, Indy Lights, and Atlantics, but not Formula Super Vee. Could you tell me more about that series? Was it like a precursor to Indy Lights, or I'd love to learn more about that series.
Well, in those days, that was actually one of the big supporting events for IndyCar, because Volkswagen got behind it. And so in the day that we didn't have Indy Lights, back in '85 when I was doing the series, that's all there was. It was that and Formula Atlantic. And Formula Atlantic at the time was growing, but it wasn't, it wasn't quite getting the exposure that Super Vee was. So that obviously with the natural progression was to go to the Super Vee because I wanted to be exposed to the IndyCar crowd. And so did the Super Vee series, which was a lot of fun. I had some success there, not as much success as I would have wanted. I would have loved to have been able to win that championship there. I think we had a car that we could have done it with. We just had a lot of bad luck that year. Just some races that we lost motors, and just had some situations where guys taking me out of races, and in those days you just can't afford to give up points, and that's what ended up happening that year. And I think I ended up fifth in the series. I think I might have still gotten Rookie of the Year that year. Just scored 3 wins that year. It set a lot of track records everywhere I went. So, and my brother was really my benchmark because, he was there in Super Vee before I was. So he set a lot of track records, and my benchmark was, okay, I'm going to go break your records. And I did.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Milwaukee because that was special in that you not only broke the track record in qualifying, you went on to win the race, and it was obviously the same weekend that your father, Mario, scored the pole for the IndyCar race and went on to
Yes.
win too, which I think was, a historic benchmark that had not been achieved before. What are your memories from that weekend?
Well, that weekend was just a stellar weekend for us. I had such success that weekend, so did my father, and so we basically clean swept the weekend. And it was, I believe, we also made history that day too. I think we were the first time the father son won on the same weekend, so it was fun, and we were able to do it both from the pole, and he dominated his race, I dominated my race, and so you can say we had a clean sweep that day. Yeah, we did it again in Pocono too. And back, and that actually skip up another year, when we became was the American Racing Series in the day before it became Indy Lights. We had a really good day at Pocono too. Same type of situation where I was on the pole in my race, track record, and won my race. Dad won. Dad was on the front row with Michael, was on the I should say, on the pole that day for Pocono race, and Dad won the race, and Michael unfortunately didn't finish that day. It was just, we would have capped off a great weekend if he would have had a result as well. But it was a good day. But again, we've had a lot of success that way.
Yeah, you bring up the American Racing Series, so kind of like I guess before it was called Indy Lights.
Mhm.
You were really successful in that series. I think the first 2 years you raced in it, you ended up finishing second in the championship, both years. Was there any ever, I guess, pressure or desire to move up to the IndyCar series much quicker, given your success, to this point?
I mean, the reason why I did 2 years, I mean, I was trying to win the championship the second year. I felt that we really had a shot because obviously joining the team that won the championship the first year. So I joined that team. So I felt, oh, we got a really good shot at this. And we did. We had great success throughout the year, scoring some wins and had a lot of top fives, podium quite a few times that year. And just was patient that year and was just gaining points where I would in 86, I wasn't gaining the points like I was gaining in 87. So, it's just, I guess, you just trying to bide my time before I tried to make the move to go to IndyCar because in those days there also wasn't a lot of opportunities in IndyCar at that point. Everybody kind of was under contracts and stuff like that. So there really wasn't anywhere to go in IndyCar at that point. So it's I kind of had to kind of keep learning so to get myself even more prepared to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you did, I think, in 1989 is you moved to Formula Atlantics, but you did it with Newman Racing, I believe. And the car looked almost identical to the Newman Haas Indy cars, right? Those
Right.
famous Havilland Kmart cars.
Yeah.
How was your experience switching over to Formula Atlantic? It sounds like you moved there to just gain some more experience, but getting to race with Newman Racing, and was that a good experience for you?
Oh, the Formula Atlantic series is a great series. Unfortunately, that year we were the team when I joined with Newman Racing, which is not Newman Haas. It was actually Newman. It was a totally different Newman, but still supported by Carl Haas because Carl Haas was actually the importer for the Reynard chassis for Formula Atlantic that year. It was the first year for the Reynard chassis. So Adrian Reynard was just dabbling it with ground effects at that time, and he didn't have a true understanding of how ground effects cars should work. He was trying because he came out of the flat bottom type cars from Europe, so he was trying to adapt the flat bottom car to the ground effects type car. And suspension wise, the car was not where it needed to be. The side pods, or should say the under tray, needed to be stiffer. It was too flexible. So we had a lot of issues with the chassis. We made the best of it. We tried to make improvements on it. Unfortunately, we couldn't quite make Adrian Reynard understand that we needed to do more with the under trays and stuff like that to stiffen it up because the Swift chassis that we were competing with that year, the Swift chassis was just right on the mark, and David Brunn, who designed that car, did an amazing job because the car was just a well-rounded car, had everything, but he really had a true understanding of aerodynamics. And unfortunately, it took Reynard another year or so before they started really getting the hang of what they needed to do. Unfortunately, I was the I guess you could say the guinea pig of having the prototype car at the beginning. So we were just trying to learn the car and learned a lot of things about what we needed to do, but unfortunately we didn't able to achieve the success that I would have loved that we could have done with that car. Because there's some tracks that the car was good, um, and then when the car was good, then we had mechanical failures. Where we had gearboxes that were flexing, and we were blowing gears and stuff like that in the car. And like at Mid Ohio, for example, I started second on the grid there, and but the whole weekend we were having gearbox issues. Uh, there's areas, I don't know if you're familiar with Mid Ohio, but there's the area where they call Madness. It's the up and down hills. When you come down the hill and you start going back up, as we were that back up part, every time we would load the gearbox or the suspension there, it would twist the gearbox and break. We were actually popping the gear. And so we had to come up with some kind of solution for the race because we weren't going to last, but a lap or so, the thing was going to break. I had a great engineer, and he was able to create something that we could just kind of stiffen up that gearbox so it wouldn't flex as much. And so we were able to get that, but then unfortunately in the race, the motor went. So, and again, we were also in the first year of the Toyota motor too. As you know, that series was sponsored by Toyota, but I was like one of the first drivers to drive the Toyota engine. Everybody else had the Cosworth engine. So I was competing against, a proven engine. And, so we were out there, and throughout the year, we had to go through different motor builders, to just trying to find somebody that could build a better motor for us and a more reliable motor for us. And we finally did find somebody. And but unfortunately it came too late in the season. It's for us to salvage the season.
Yeah, I actually just watched the 1989 Long Beach race, the Atlantics, in preparation for this, and you were the star of the broadcast. And that you started in the very last row due to an issue in qualifying, and you charged your way through the field, and it was very entertaining to watch. So recommend that for the audience. I did want to transition to your first attempt at IndyCar in 1990, and I think you tried to get together with a very small, like brand new team called Team Car for both the Indy 500 and I believe Milwaukee after that. So before we hop into kind of your qualifying attempt at Indy, I wanted to just kind of understand how that deal came together and kind of the, you getting the sponsorship together to run Indy.
Again, I had a lot of assistance from my father, and his influence and stuff. And for us to be able to get a chassis and stuff like that, we were able to get a chassis through Newman Racing. They were gracious enough to sell us a chassis. And I knew the Team Car guys. Team Car guys they came from the Indy Light Series. They were there. So I got to know those guys. And it just decided that we were going to try and make an attempt at Indianapolis. And that's how it all kind of came together. We found those guys and they were willing to do it. And we got a chassis and got the Cosworth engine. And unfortunately it wasn't a current chassis. It was an 89 chassis versus a 90 chassis. So the chassis was penalized aerodynamically underneath in the under tray, so it was not as efficient as it was the year before that, because they took downforce away from that car. So it was unfortunate for us, but it was a fun year. Learned a lot. Unfortunately, found the wall in turn 4. And we lost our primary car that day. And again, Carl Haas was gracious enough to get us another car. So we got another tub, and we were able to put that back together and get it back out running. And an interesting thing, it was my father was, he started coming down and was trying to help out and trying to get us going. And so in those days, obviously you had 2 different staggers that you could run, tire sizes. And so he says, well, let's put the bigger stagger on and see if we can get you to turn, get the car to rotate a little more. Well, needless to say, the car rotated really well. I ended up doing a double 360 off of turn 4 and actually parked the car under my guy's hand. And my dad comes over and he goes, I guess that didn't work. And then what we discovered was that car actually needed more downforce, not less downforce in the car. So we ended up putting more downforce in the car, and we started finding speed. And unfortunately, we ran out of time in qualifying. It came down to I was the last car waiting in line for the go. And I was hoping that the car before me was going to get done early. And then I think that car had an issue. And we ran out of time, and the gun went off, and unfortunately that year was just gone. And I was devastated because I wanted to make it, but there's a reason why I didn't make it. There's always a reason. And I was able to come back there the next year in 1991, as you know, and made the race really strong. And I really felt we were a real contender that year.
Yeah. Well, I guess you're talking about bump day for 1990, and I guess is context. I mean, you originally did qualify in the field before you got bumped, and then on bump day, I mean, to your point, I don't think you even got to run and respond. So,
Right.
yeah, and then the next weekend you went to Milwaukee. You did qualify for the race, but the car encountered technical gremlins before the race even started, and I was wondering if you could talk us through the emotion of qualifying for your first professional IndyCar race and then the car having technical difficulties before the green flag.
Oh yeah, well that's it's just those pesky gremlins. We're going to fire the car, right? Everybody, gentlemen, start your engines, and all of a sudden the car's not firing. And it turns out that there was a problem with the ECU box, and so, I can't get fired, so I have to start from the pit lane, and, it's just not the way I wanted to start off my first race in the IndyCar series. But once we got going, the car, we were doing okay. We were holding our own. Unfortunately, we were many laps down by the time we actually were able to join the race. And then again, once again, blew a motor in that race. And all I was trying to do is just finish that race. I just wanted the experience, but it was it was still great because one thing I did, which was fun, is I outqualified the guy that won the Indy 500, which was Ari Leindyke. I outqualified him. So I felt pretty good about that.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think you raced the rest of the 1990 season, but you did get a deal together, as you referenced, for the entire 1991 series or season, and that was with Bayside Racing. I believe they're an IMSA team that transitioned into IndyCar, and that was their first year. Do you
Right.
want to give a little context of how you guys got together?
That again was just really the ties with Texaco. It was just kind of one of those deals where uh, they were looking for the Bayside team was looking to replace Dominic Dobson, which was their driver that they had. Um, and there was just an opportunity, and my dad, in those days was keeping his ear to the ground, and he said, "Hey, I think we got an opportunity." And I said, "Where?" I said, "This Bayside team," and they're sponsored by Texaco, and got the relationship with Texaco. Let's see what we can do, and put the bug in their ear, and they loved the idea, and so it sparked me getting to test with those guys up in Portland, and so we tested the car and went pretty well in the car. We were pretty competitive with it right off the bat, and felt pretty comfortable with it. And so we ended up making a deal, and there, history, there it is. I mean, we're off and racing. Was able to sign at least a 1-year deal to drive for them.
Yeah. This is probably a stupid question, but obviously it's Texaco. Was there any talk about adding a third car to the Newman Haas stable and having you join your dad and your brother at that team?
Uh Not that I know of. I wish it would. I would have loved to been the third car, but in those days they didn't run 3 cars, so, Penske was the only one kind of doing that. Everybody else was still only running 2 cars. So when it became a budget thing, so I'm not sure that they were, it was going to work out, even though, the budget that I had was as big as their budget that they had for their cars, for my team. So it's unfortunate we didn't have the right motor that year. We had the Cosworth engine, which because it couldn't really compete so much with the Chevys. The Chevys still had us. Everywhere we had to go, we had to run the car a lot trimmer, just to make power, and stuff like that. So we actually had to give up a lot of things to be able to make the thing more competitive. But there's some races that the car was actually really quite good. And it's just, it was just one of those years where we just tried to be consistent and just get as many finishes as we could and get as good as we could. And that's what we did. We were able to achieve some of those. I think Long Beach was the one where I thought that I kind of made a mistake in that race, where I thought that if we would have been a little more patient there, I would think I could have had a podium at that race, because the car was as quick enough to be at least a third place car. And I think everybody else kind of knew that, because I was actually going pretty good there at Long Beach that year. And we were able to salvage a 10th place finish, even though if I wouldn't have bopped the wall, what it was is I bopped the wall and it popped the tire. That's all it was. It's just one of those deals in these street courses. You have to run them so close to the wall. I just got a little impatient and stepped out the back end of the car and just kind of brushed the wall just enough to pop the tire, and ruin the rest of my day in a lot of ways, because then we kind of had to go off strategy with everything, because we had to try and see if we can make up some of the differences.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention, but you covered it quite well. I mean, the first 3 races, despite the fact you're racing an underpowered Cosworth, you finished your first 3 races in the top 10. Very impressive. And the first of those races was actually Surfers Paradise, Australia, where your cousin John won. Wondering if you have any memories of that race. I just watched it recently again in preparation for this, and a couple of my observations was, one, They start the race very late in Australia. They
Mhm.
start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so the sun is at a lower angle, and
Right.
it casts a lot of shadows on the track, which some drivers were complaining about. And then, two, the other thing I noticed is different from today. When a car would crash, they
Mhm.
don't really throw the yellow back then.
No.
You guys would be racing around full speed, and there'd be safety trucks on the track. What are your memories from Surfers Paradise?
Well, Surfers Paradise was a fun race. I mean, that weekend we the car was pretty good. I think we qualified half decent for our first race. It was the first race of the season, and just the car throughout the day got better and better. We kept tuning on a little bit. Every pit stop we tuned on a little bit more, and and I tried to just try to. My goal was really stay on the lead lap, and the best I could. And unfortunately, at one point, I did get passed by Michael. Um, but that was a very unique situation. If you remember, we were coming up into the chicane, and I saw Michael coming, so I opened the door for Michael. But unfortunately, I was trying to keep the door open for Al as far as I could go. But unfortunately, we got to the chicane. I had to close the door on Al, but it wasn't done on purpose. And of course, Al ended up crashing. But um, and then everybody's saying it was my fault. So of course, I went over to Al and I go, Al, hey, look, I didn't mean to chop you there. I ran out of room and I had to take the corner. He goes, hell no. He said, I was coming in so hot. He said, there's no way I was making that turn. He said, I had to spin myself from keeping to hit you. He said, it was just, I was just trying to chase your brother who was running too fast. And that's, but the good part about that was, we got the yellow that I was looking for. Michael pitted. I stayed on track, got my lap back. So I was able to get back on the lead lap. And I was like, yes, okay, now I'm on the lead lap. And then throughout the rest of the race, I was starting to make ground on the cars in front of me. So I was dogging, I think it was Scott Brayton. Um, I almost had sixth. I was right there. I was like right on his gearbox at the end. And a couple more laps, I think I could have got sixth.
Want to progress? You've mentioned the 1991 Indy 500, but again, I want to revisit that now. I think that is the first time that all four of you qualified for the same race, I believe, and just want to get your memories from that day because you ended up being the 1991 Rookie of the Year, but you did run into some attrition issues, unfortunately. So, would love to hear about your feelings about the race, and then two, just in general. The cars back then, the reliability not as strong as it is today, which you've referenced several times during this conversation. So, would love to get your thoughts on that too during those 500-mile races.
That was a fun race. It was a great race. I mean, we had our trials and tribulations that day. I mean, we had puncture. I had a puncture on the main straightaway where I was able to save the car and get the car into control and bring it in. But um, yeah, I mean, it was one of those days where you just tried to stay as clean as possible. Because there's always was a lot of attrition back in those days. So you figured let's just try and hang in there, as best we could. And the car was actually pretty darn good, even though we were lacking power on the straightaways. We were able to still stay right there with everybody. The car itself was really working. And so I was excited about that, I was able to kind of have a lot of fun with that because the car was working so good. I knew it was down on power, so it could only pass whoever I could pass, in those days. And unfortunately, we ran into the proverbial blown engine again. I think I was just about to pass Gordon Johncock for position. And just as it was drafting up on him, as we went into three, the motor let go. It's just no warning. It just let go. It was like, oh man. And we weren't really even stressing the motor that much. And it was just unfortunate that the motor let go. And you know what, to be honest with you, we would have probably had a top six that day if we would have finished because I was running right ahead of my dad at that point in the race. And so the car was okay. I mean, like I said, we were down on power. We were making it up in other areas. But that was definitely a fun race to drive. And that was great that I was able to do it with the four of us in that race.
Yeah, it just seemed like those 500-mile races in general, it'd be like a quarter of the field would finish. I believe in the Michigan 500 that year, you also were running well, but just had your engine let go as well, or had a gremlin there,
Hmm.
if I recall correctly.
Yep. Yep. Again, we had, it had issues. We just couldn't keep the reliability in the motor. I mean, they were trying to make more horsepower, and unfortunately, we were sacrificing the reliability of the engine by doing that.
You had an engine malfunction, I believe, at Mid-Ohio, and there's a great clip of you, pulling off to the fire marshals at Mid-Ohio. You get out of the car, you hop the fence, and you sit in, like, some fans' kinda beach chairs.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that? It was kinda
Oh yeah.
comical from
That
a
was fun.
broadcast
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. It got a little toasty in the car. We broke an oil line, and the thing caught fire. And they kept trying to say, "You're on fire, you're on fire, you're on fire." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I don't know where to, I'm trying to find a place to pull off." And I kept looking at getting bigger and bigger, so I just pulled straight off, and at the bottom of where the Madness corner, where at the bottom of the hill there, I just pulled straight off to right towards the fire marshal, and jumped out of the car, and I jumped over the tire wall, and one of the fans says, "Hey, you just sit here, sitting," and I just sat in sat in one of their chairs. "Hey, you want a beer?" I'm like, "No, I'm good." But yeah, that was not a good day for us, but that was kind of funny.
Yeah, very funny. Another kind of viral clip on YouTube, and you've referenced AJ Foyt, and I'm sure you've been asked this 100 times, but he gets out of the car at Nazareth and kind of evokes your name in a famous AJ Foyt rant that he was not happy with your driving. Um, and then, as you mentioned, you ended up signing with AJ Foyt for the Indy 500 the next year. Could you just expand on how you kind of bridged that gap after that race with AJ and ended up getting the ride with him?
Well, it was the funny part about it is that at the end of the race, I knew that everybody kept saying AJ's looking for you, and I'm like, "Oh boy, that's not good. AJ Foyt's looking for you." So I went over, and I had had a little discussions with him. Of course, he was not too so kind with his words. But at the end of the day, when he cooled off and everything, uh, here's what people don't realize: that at the banquet that year, he actually apologized to me for that incident, and I was like, my jaw dropped wide open. I said, "AJ Foyt apologizing? Wow, that's big. That was big of him to do." And, he just said that now. He said, the more he thought about it, he said, There's no way." He said he was having problems because, he's just coming back from his injuries and stuff like that. And his feet, he couldn't put as much brake pressure as he wanted to in the corner. And, and he was blaming me for the crash, his crashing. But he said, it was really more my fault than yours. He said, I couldn't get stopped. You didn't really do anything in that situation. I said, "Well, it would have been nice for you to have not, made so many mean things to say about me, because, saying I shouldn't be out there and this and that." But, it's like I wasn't doing that I didn't chop. If I did chop you, I didn't do it on purpose. That's for sure. That's not the way I drove.
So, you did end up signing with AJ. Were there any other teams that you considered? And if you don't mind my asking, did Bayside just not continue to race the next year, or was there a funding issue? Like, why did that relationship end?
Yeah, we lost our sponsor. Texaco pulled out from sponsoring the car. It wasn't due to what we did and everything. It's just that they wanted to focus on the Newman Haas team, um, for wholeheartedly, and put more money towards that team and stuff like that. So unfortunately, we were at the wrong end of the stick on that one with Texaco, for that situation. But it's just, in those days, there wasn't a lot of opportunity to go anywhere. Even from, the next year in 92, there just really wasn't anywhere to go. And those seats were open. Everybody had to the drivers, and they're all signed for multi-year deals. And so, in those days, it just didn't have many opportunities. So it just unfortunately dried up for me. And then you end up taking deals that you really don't want to take, but you want to drive, but you take these deals not really because it was the best deal. It was only because it was the only deal. And I didn't really like doing that. It got to the point where I had stopped taking rides like that, because it just makes you look bad as a driver, because it's a lot of times it's a team doing it, and you're the one taking the brunt out there. "Oh, you can't drive anymore." Well, a lot of times it was just the team, and a lot of times it wasn't even the team's fault, because they were just underfunded. as well.
Yeah, if anyone looks at your box scores from the 1991 season, when you weren't having reliability issues, you were a top 10 driver, and it's evident when you go back and look through your results. And so kind of going back to 1992, you'd referenced it earlier in this discussion. Obviously not a good weekend for you or your family, to be honest with you, in the Indy 500 specifically. Want to cut right to it. I mean, you obviously you had a car or a tire essentially come off your car and you went into the wall, damaging your legs. Would you mind walking us through that scenario of events, the injuries you incurred, and kind of your recovery after the fact?
Not a good day for us, obviously, as you know. I mean, dad got hurt that day too. I mean, he got to turn four wall, and good by grace of God, I saw him get up out of the car, so at least I knew he was okay in that sense. Didn't know that he had a broken foot, but yeah, we were having our problems that day. We had a right rear hub cage that was kind of was we were having issues with it all day long. Um, Pit stop after pit stop, things it just kept working on that side of the car, and when you're in the driver, you're just kind of sitting there like, what's taking so long? They're working on the right rear, and they kept sending me out. And the last time they sent me out, um, before I know it, I'm in the wall. And the only thing I remember is waking up in the hospital. Um, but leading up to that, it's funny because I never recalled anything about the accident itself. Obviously the wheel hub cage come off, or I should say the wheel come off, an entry to turn two, and got the wall head on, as head on as you could hit it. And unfortunately, not good for me because those cars didn't have a lot of front foot protection in those days. So you had a nose cone and you had a bulkhead and then your feet. And unfortunately, went right through the nose cone into the bulkhead and got my feet, and got them pretty good. Hit me so hard that I hit the wall so hard that my belt stretched. I mean, I should say my belts didn't stretch. My body stretched. My head actually, my face hit the steering wheel of the race car. That's how far I stretched. And unfortunately, when I hit so hard that it broke it caved everything in on my legs. So I was pinned in the car, and if you're watching the footage, I actually undid my belts, and I was trying to push myself up out of the race car. I couldn't get it, but I was pinned. But I was like, as a boxer, you get punch drunk. They don't remember anything. That's exactly what I was. I was doing stuff, and I don't even remember doing it. And just an unfortunate day for us as a family, and of course, then Michael leading the race, going away, should have won that thing with his eyes closed, and had a freaking fuel pump belt break on the thing, and it's just something so simple on him, and it's just the dumb luck that our families had at that speedway. If we would have had the luck of the Unters, man, those guys, I would have just loved to rub up against them a little bit, just to get a little bit of their luck, because those guys they definitely had some luck on their side as well as skill. I would have loved that. I lucked out that day, that's for sure.
How long was your recovery?
It took me I was ahead of schedule in my rehab by about 6 months. I was actually back in a race car in December that same year. People don't realize I was actually in a prototype car. Yeah, I actually tested a prototype car down in Sebring that same year. Could barely walk, but I got in the race car. And my feet were still actually semi-broken yet still. But I made a go of it, and then I actually raced in the spring that next year. I raced in the Miami Grand Prix in the IMSA race in a prototype car. That was my first race back. And then, of course, I scored the deal with Pagan Racing to do Indianapolis that year. That year. But the cool part about that year in '92 is it was an unusual way to become friends with somebody. But I became pretty good friends with Nelson Piquet that year because Nelson got hurt that same year in '92, and he and I rehab together. And in those days, he was winding his career down. I was still kind of ramping my career up, and I didn't really want him to wind his career down like that, where he was just gonna retire. And so I started a bit of a rivalry, or I should say, a little bit of a competition between he and I at rehab. I kept telling my therapist, said, "Tell him that I said I was gonna get on my feet before him. Just tell him that. Keep telling him that." And that's what he kept doing. All of a sudden, it became this competition between he and I. And all of a sudden, he was getting out of bed, and he was coming in, and really working really hard. And I got him. He beat me back to he got on his feet a week prior to me. So he beat me there, but I also won the battle because I was able to get him motivated enough to want to come back and try Indianapolis again in '93. And we did. We both made the race in '93. So it was a mission accomplished for me with him, but also gained a friend out of it too. I mean, and quite the character. Nelson Piquet is quite the character.
Yeah, well, so I've read. I do want to talk about your experience with Pagan Racing, as you mentioned. I believe as part of your testing for that effort, you guys went down to Texas World Speedway, so not the current Texas track that
Right.
people are familiar with modern day, but it was probably more shaped like a Fontana or a Michigan, if I recall correctly. And you went down there and tested and set the closed speed IndyCar record officially. Talk to me about that. Were you nervous getting into an IndyCar after sustaining such severe injuries and then racing, or I guess driving at that speed?
No, actually, it wasn't. I was excited. I was excited to get back in the car, to be honest with you. I never thought twice about, not wanting to get back in the car. I know it was itching to get back in the race car and feel that speed again. And then we going there, I was working with a very experienced crew chief, John Barnes, a lot of experience. So I trusted him as far as setups and stuff like that. So he set the car up there. The car was like magic. The car was so good. We were so free. We kept freeing the car up more and more that day, the 2 days we tested there. Started running 233 laps. We ran a couple of 233 laps, and then we said, yeah, you know what? Let's bolt on a brand new set. Let's run about half a load of fuel, and let's try and see what we can get out of this thing. We'll go 10 laps. We'll do 10 laps. We got enough fuel for that. We'll do 10 laps and see what we can do. And we did. The first lap is like a 230. The rest of them were 233 pluses. And then I was able to get a 234 and a half. I think that's what I ran. But everyone was over 230 miles an hour in the 10 lap run we did. And that car was just so good. And I was so excited. I was like, oh man, this is awesome. And then we went to Indianapolis and tested that same year. And we were actually the fastest car all through testing. And everybody's tested during the off season. We were setting the benchmark. We ended up running like a 220 in those days because they just reconfigured the track. As you remember, they put the warm up lane in, and they had like rumble strips in the corners, so you couldn't really run down on the apron like you used to. So you had to kind of nibble at it, but you couldn't really run on it. So obviously the speeds weren't as fast as they were the previous year. But I was able to run a speed of 227 and a half, I think, something like that we ran. And again, we ran a 4-lap average there. I think we were averaging close to like the 227 mark, somewhere around there. So we were really stoked about that, and kind of became the talk of the town going into the month of May. Everybody was saying, wow, these guys, they're on our radar because they got some good speed. And we carried that into the month of May. We were actually, every day we were in the top 9. Most days we ran the top 9. First day, I think I was second to my dad. So it all started off good, and it was really going good that whole year, until, in the race, unfortunately, Roberto Guerrero and I decided to, Roberto decided to make a dive bomb move on me and lose control of the car and get into me. And unfortunate, it's just an unfortunate situation. I thought, at the time, going into the corner, it was actually my in lap. I was coming in for one of my stops. And so I was giving him the room because he had just come out. So I was giving him the room, and I thought I gave him enough room. And all of a sudden, before I know it, I'm going around backwards. I'm like, what just happened? Why did I get hit? Why did he, lose it? And, then of course he was trying to blame me for chopping him. And I'm like, I think you need to look at that video because I couldn't go any higher in the corner. I was right on the fringe of where the marbles were, so I couldn't go any higher. So, I don't know, what he was thinking in that situation because I gave him plenty of room. I just don't understand why he came in so hot. But unfortunate. But we became friends after that. So, unfortunately, we have a funny way of meeting people.
Yeah, you're making a lot of friends over there in the month of May. Question for you as it relates to your career later on. You never returned to a full-time ride, but with the development of the Indy Racing League, which kicked off in 1996 as part of the split, did you ever consider pursuing a full-time ride in the Indy Racing League?
I did. I mean, not maybe in the first couple of years of it, but I think it was 99. I think it was. I started looking at it more closely because obviously looking for an opportunity, and there was a little bit more opportunity over there at the time. So yeah, I did actually have a deal put together in the IRL with Derek Walker. Unfortunately, just after we signed the deal, the sponsor we had filed Chapter 11. And it's unfortunate for us that, but that was that free eye. I don't know if you were familiar with free eye. It was a free internet back in the day, where they used the little baby in their commercials and this and that. Anyway, they were our primary sponsor, and we had a lot of back end contingent type of deals that were going to kind of steer that program by, business to business that they were going to gain from. So that unfortunately, like I said, just after we signed the deal, which I would have been teammate to Sarah Fisher. They were running Sarah Fisher that year. And it's unfortunate. We had the deal all signed and everything. We're all ready to go. And they bellied me, and we had to pull the deal. And Derek was gracious enough to let us out of the contract, and we just kind of made it null and void. Unfortunate. So that never materialized for us.
Well, as we start to wind down here, a couple more questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously raced with a lot of people in your short time in the IndyCar series. Was there people that you specifically enjoyed either racing with, or people that you maybe avoided on the track because they didn't make you comfortable?
There's a couple of drivers. I mean, one driver in particular, Eddie Cheever. Eddie, nice guy and everything, but we certainly had our run-ins on the racetrack. He's one of the driver that was tough to race around because you just never really could 100% trust him. But off the track, nice guy and everything. It's just one of those deals where just never. He kind of had a run-ins. We used to call him Cleaver because he'd always chop your nose. But anyway. Like I said, Eddie is a good guy and everything. It's just, we just had our run-ins on the racetrack. I think I had a few run-ins with Scott Brayton, where we ran wheel to wheel pretty hard at each other quite a few times, and a couple of times I was on the right end of the stick, a couple of times he wasn't on the right end of the stick. So it's kind of one of those deals. I did have a run-in with Tony Bettenhausen though in '91 at the Meadowlands. Tried to move on Tony, got inside of him at the beginning of the race, and Tony just plain flat put me in the guardrail, and I had nowhere to go but into the guardrail, bounce off the guardrail, and go over top of him. And again, one of those deals where he's saying that I hit him, and I'm like, oh, look at the picture, look at the video. The video clearly shows that my car was all the way inside of you when you came down on me. So where you didn't see me is like, okay, you might have been blind. I don't know, but unfortunate situation there because, again, another one of my bad luck days where I thought, we finally got the car working for the race that day, and unfortunate that we never got to really see what that car could do.
Gotcha. And then moving away from drivers and looking more at tracks, were there tracks that you liked better than others?
Oh yeah, for sure. I love Milwaukee. Milwaukee Mile was one of my favorites. Phoenix was another one of my favorites. But as far as road courses, I say my all-time favorite is Elkhart Lake. I love Elkhart Lake. I thought that track was such a fun track to drive because it's a long track, but it's a track that you had to really just flow the car. And that was kind of my driving style, was really flowing the car. So it really suited me really well. So I always did well at Elkhart Lake. It's just one of those tracks where you could just, we always say, let your hair down. It's just one of those tracks because it's so big and fast that you could just kind of let that car flow. And that track was all momentum. If you don't keep your momentum throughout all the corners, you're going to be slow around there. It's all places, all rolling speed. It's all rolling speed. And I just love that place. And again, going back in the old days, I mean, I guess one of my all-time favorite tracks is Lime Rock. Lime Rock Park was a fun little racetrack to race on. That was, I always did great up there. I mean, that was a fun racetrack to drive.
You, in your career, after kind of hanging up the helmet, you have coached and supported a lot of drivers in an official capacity. Is that something that you're still doing today?
No, unfortunately, I backed away from doing the coaching. It kind of dried up because everybody started becoming a driver coach. All these drivers are looking for rides. All of a sudden, they became driver coaches. So it got to the point where I'm competing with all these people for these jobs, and I wasn't getting them because everybody, it's this guy is willing to come in and sweep the shop, I guess, is the reason why I got the job. But yeah, I just kind of I dabbled in it. I thought that it would be a fun thing to do outside the seat, is to be able to help with the knowledge that I had, help others. And I was able to help some of them. I had a lot of fun with a couple of them. Of course, coaching Marco was fun. But then coached another kid by the name of TJ Fisher back in the day. I've coached him, I think, 2013, 2014 season in the Formula Mazda series. And we achieved 2 championships that year, or in the 2 years that we ran them. And broke a lot of track records with them. But one of our key to success there was we did a lot of simulation testing. When we couldn't go to racetracks, we would go run a simulator, and we were able to learn on the simulator and actually set the car up on the simulator and apply it to the race car, and it was actually really working for us. So that was one of our tricks that we had. And of course, I got the coach Ho Pin Tong, the Chinese driver at Indianapolis in 2011. That was fun. I had a great time with Ho Pin. Very, very talented driver. And unfortunately, we just didn't have the luck. Again, he got bit by the wind there. We ran in all different conditions that month. Unfortunately, on qualifying day, we had the wind going in the wrong direction, and the wind pinned his nose in turn 1, and unfortunate. He didn't do anything really wrong. It's just the only thing I would have told him to do is alter his line slightly on turn 1 on approach because of pinning the nose. And it's something that we never was able to really have him experience. That was the only thing all month, and of course, this is what bit us in qualifying. He, in qualifying, was on his 4th lap and his final lap, and that's when he pinned the nose. I was just hoping that we was just going to bring it home, and unfortunately, I was trying to go for a little bit more, and that's when it got away from him. But it was fun all the way up till then. I think I was excited to get that car qualified because I was really excited to see what he could do in the race. Because I think we had something, as far as a race car. Because one thing we did have, we actually had, because when I worked there, was working for Dragon Racing, which was Jay Penske. So we actually had support from Roger, the Penske boys. So that was fun because we were able to learn quite a bit from those guys. But we actually had them beat. We were doing stuff that we were basically sticking to the basics, and of course, all the other bigger teams tried to do a little bit more. And we were sticking to the basics, and it was working for us. And I think that we were actually doing better than they were. They were actually coming over to us and asking us what we were doing, and we were like, "No, nothing really." No, we were trying to be like, "No, we're not really doing anything different." Than you guys are doing. We're trying not to give them what we're doing exactly, but we just kind of stuck to a plan all month long. Up to qualifying, we were sticking to a plan of how we were going to approach it with Hopin, and it was really working well because we worked him up to speed perfectly. And he was peaking at the right time for qualifying. We were so excited because he was right there in the top 5 or top 6 of drivers that could have been could have challenged for the pole. That's where we felt we were at with that car, and unfortunately, we didn't get the opportunity to show what he really could do. But it was fun.
Nice. And I guess as we close out here, this is something I ask every guest at the end of the episode. But with all your experience, what would you advise a young person trying to enter the IndyCar series today?
Just keep your nose to the grindstone. I mean, never give up. Just keep on pressing forward. You're going to have bad days, but you're also going to have great days, So it's just one of those deals where you just, perseverance does pay off. And that's just the best advice I can give to any new up and coming driver is just, believe in your dream, and that dream should come true for you if you believe in it wholeheartedly.
Love it. Great advice. So Jeff Andretti, thank you so much for making time. This has been an awesome conversation. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Great being here.